be back home with you all. And, I just got to say this. I appreciate so much the support of you as a congregation and the elders allowing during this difficult time for us, allowing me that extra time to go home. It's been amazing support. God's been good because my brother's work has let him take extra time off. And he's head of the VA optometry for the Southeast, and they're letting him be gone as much as he needs to be. And my brother-in-law's boss, he is head architect building the new hospital at Duke University, and they're letting him take all the time off he needs. And so we have really been blessed by God to have this support system around us. The good news is my mom is doing phenomenal. Remember when it happened, I had said she wouldn't be walking hardly at all for months. We are almost exactly 3 months out, and she is walking without a cane in the house. Now, she has to have some support and can't walk a long, long time, but the doctor, the therapist are amazed at where she's at, especially, as they keep saying, especially given your age, you're old, so she's doing great. And we appreciate all of this. So this morning's lesson is God wants to hold your hand. Who remembers the song, I Want to Hold Your Hand? I'm going to sing it for you now. No, not happening. That song was so popular. It's such a great song. And the truth kind of behind it is God really does want to hold our hand. Last Sunday morning, first for me, I went to church in jeans and a fishing shirt because I hadn't planned to be there on Sunday. In fact, we did overnight express of my medicines and her phone last Monday. So we were kind of caught short-handed there. But I was at church, and I had a school teacher that I asked for her by name when I went into 5th grade or something, middle school. And she was amazed because she was one of those teachers that students begged to get out of her class. She was so hard and a little bit on the mean side. But I loved that family. And I would go mess around on their farm in the summers all the time. And so Sunday, I hadn't seen her in a while. And so Sunday, I go up to her and I said, "Oh, Betty Ruth." And she hugged me. And then we talked for like 5 minutes and she wouldn't let go of my hand. There's something special about holding hands with friends. In Haiti, Luke and I will walk down the street holding hands because the men there, when you're very close to another man, very close friends, you hold hands when you're having a private conversation. And it's important. And so, in fact, that's a lot of cultures. America's the only one we're scared to hold hands with men for the most part. But holding hands is important. Hands are important. I mean, think about the hands of a concert pianist. I mean, look how long those fingers are. They're made for that. And they take years and years of training to make those fingers do those things that seem impossible. Or maybe the hands of a blacksmith, hard and rough, but yet they can take metal that is not designed to move, heat it, shape it into beautiful works of art. The hands of a woodworker. One time I was with Doug, we unloaded a whole bunch of rough sawn cherry, and it's not too many months till he's showing me this beautiful cabinet. He had taken that wood and shaped it and moved it, and then sanded it and stained it to this gorgeous piece of massively heavy furniture because it's been moved. Anyway, big, beautiful. The hands of a surgeon. Surgeons are impressive, and they know it. Anyway, we've all talked to them before. But I had the just privilege in Haiti of working as his surgical tech for Nikolai a couple times, and to watch his big hands tie these tiny little knots and reach in there and cut without nicking a vein is just disgusting and amazing. And amazing. Hands doing things that hands just shouldn't do. So as we go through this today, we're going to look at a number of examples of Jesus holding hands, Jesus touching people. This sermon is not about getting you to come forward and repent. I said that the other day, and so maybe that's good luck. Don't come forward. Maybe that'll work. No, this sermon is about reminding you in those difficult days, reminding you in those challenging times that there is somebody standing there holding your hand to support you and help you. Let's start with the reading and then we'll move forward.
Morning's reading will be out of the book of Mark, chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus puts his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly.
You notice this, Jesus took his hand and led him outside the village. Have you ever had the opportunity to lead a blind person somewhere? Yeah, it's really interesting. We had two men in our congregation where I preached right before we came here, and both were blind, one from birth, one as a teenager. And they had a system. The one would hold on to the shoulder of the other one, and they would follow each other, and then someone would lead them. But one day at a restaurant, we had taken them out to eat, Sunday dinner, tables everywhere, you know how that is. And I said, "Come on, I'll take you back up to the salad bar and get you a second helping of everything." And I stuck out my hand and grabbed the one guy's arm, hooked on the wrong one. I grabbed the back guy and brought him to the front. So the other one grabs hold of him, and I ran them over every table in the place. Not because I'm mean, because I messed up the system. They were depending on me to walk, and they could do it. If you led them the right way, they would single file you, basically. And they were so trusting. They were just so trusting. This man went with Jesus, who I doubt he'd met him. I'm sure he'd heard of him. But he took his hand and walked outside the village. Jesus touching him. First thing you need to know is Jesus loves us with his hands. Over and over in the Bible. And I didn't count them, but look how many times we see the gift of touch. A few weeks ago, my brother said, he was hurrying back to Memphis. He wanted to be there for church. He said, "I've got an interesting kind of conundrum. We've got a lady there who wants the elders to come to her home and lay hands on her because the doctors can't seem to find what's going on." He said, "What do you think?" And I said, "What do you mean, what do I think?" "Well, I'm just kind of uncomfortable." I said, "Brother, you're an elder in the church. And James told you to go lay hands on her and pray for her that she may be healed. So you need to go lay hands on her and pray for her. It's your job as an elder." Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that one. So they did. And he said, "I felt better after that." Because hands, now, did he impart a miraculous healing? No. Did he help facilitate providential healing? Maybe. But if nothing else, he said, "We love you enough to touch you." That's a huge deal. Do you love people enough to touch them? Now, it's more than just reaching out and touching them. Maybe it's like when greeted Karen, haven't seen her in a few weeks. We've talked on the phone once, but reached out and hugged her. We held each other for a second. Maybe it's putting your hand on your back. Maybe it's a grandfather with his arm around his grandkids. Maybe it's the baby that you just hold them until they quit letting you hold them. It comes at about 3.5 for girls. Boys, it's a little longer. Yeah, you hold them while you've got that chance to hold them and to touch them. And Jesus knew that. He always touched the people that touched his heart. I mean, the lepers. Now, what did the community look like for lepers? People, they were by law had to walk through yelling, "Unclean! Unclean. They were covered head to toe in rags, kind of like you see in the Middle East, the burqa. That's what a leper had to, because they were too ugly to look at because of these patches. And so that they wouldn't spread germs. And so they would walk through saying unclean, and people would get away. If they went to the store and said, I need groceries, they didn't go up and ask for them. They didn't touch anything. Somebody would probably throw a bag out to them. Typically, in leper colonies, clean people would bring bags of food and leave them for them to come take. I know of a leper colony that's still in use today. It's in a stone quarry type setting. They're so scared, it's a third world country, that the germs will leave that, so they keep them down in like this giant stone quarry. And people lower food in baskets to them. Incredible. But Jesus touched him. When Peter's mother-in-law got sick, the Bible says Jesus went and touched her to help her become well. He expressed love through touching people. Touching the children, right? We talked about this 2 weeks ago when I was here last. All the little children would come and the disciples said, scat. And Jesus said, no, bring them to me. He wanted to touch them and talk to them. A touch can express your love in a way that words cannot. It's hard to have a fight with your spouse when you're hugging. Or when you're holding hands and looking soulfully into each other's eyes. It's hard to fight. You know, when we fight, what do? We back up. We back up and make distance, you know. Touch heals so many things. Touch expresses so many feelings. Jesus had this touch of a gentle, willing, powerful, healing love. Side lesson number 1 here today. I want to urge you, when you have someone you are close to, someone you love, or a friend, or a colleague, when you go visit them, and we should, when you go visit them, touch them. If it's just rubbing them on the shoulder, if it's holding their hand, and I urge you, if you have someone that's dying, and you think they can't hear you anymore, they can. Hold their hand and tell them you love them. I cannot measure how important that is. So he loves us with his hand. So how's your touch? I want you to evaluate yourself, and how are you at touching other people? How are you at touching the children of the church? Younger people, how are you at touching the elderly of the church to let them know that you respect what they have done for this church and how much you love them? Elderly people, how's your touch of these younger ones? How fortunate are we to have all these little kids that we have? Numerically wise, we are blessed more than a lot of big churches, I know. Are you touching them to let them know you care? Jesus also lifts us up with his hands. On more than one occasion, I've had to catch Mom since this accident. The other day, and I made fun of her because I'm not a very good son, but she tried to step over one brick height step. Got on it, and she said, uh-oh, here she came. I stuck my arms out and caught her. You know, Jesus does that for us. Every time we stumble, he wants to be there to catch you. Now, I said he wants to be. Jesus is not automatically standing there to catch you. Blasphemy. How dare you? If you don't ask him to be there, he's not going to be there, because we chase him off. You know we do. When you're good 5 days a week and you're up to something you shouldn't be on Saturday night, you don't want Jesus standing there. When you say, I'm done with church, I'm done with other, you've just told him, I don't need you to catch me. Jesus wants to lift you up. Once he places his hands on you, he can. Psalm 40, verse 2, David writes, he brought me out of the pit of destruction, out of the miry clay, and he put my feet up on a rock, making my footsteps firm. A number of years ago, I went out by myself. Normally, I hunted with Roger, sometimes Hal, but I went out this day by myself, and I went to Bruce's, and I had asked him, had the fields dried up? Well, his answer was yes, because the higher ground had. But I didn't go to the higher ground. I had a tree stand down in this low spot where I'd been seeing a lot of deer tracks. And I walked down there, and it looked okay on the surface. And I waded out the old hayfield bottom corner. I waded out, and both feet sunk up over my calves. It's like, well, that's nasty. Have you ever tried to get your feet out of mud that sunk up over you? I went, uh-oh. Nothing was moving. So what option did I have? I had to lay down in that mud, pull my feet out, stand there barefooted in winter, get those boots out of the mud, walk back to the car holding my boots, and mud up to my knees, all over my back. Felt so stupid. So embarrassed. That's what David says. David had messed up his life to the point where David's now saying, he reached down when I was at the lowest point and pulled me out of that miry. That's that clay that sucks you up and keeps you. That miry clay, he pulled me out of that because it's hard to get out of. That blind man, he lifted him out of darkness into light. What was his life like after that day? Things that he had never seen. People. Maybe he had a mother and father still alive. Maybe he had a wife, children. Seeing them for the first time. Walking around town, people saying, hey, Joe, talk to me so I know who you are. You know? Seeing these people that were friends that he had never seen before. He moved him from helplessness into independence, from the status of a beggar in that community to being part of that community. He could now do something for himself and for his family. What about Peter? Oh, I love Peter. Peter gets out, decides he's going to walk out there on the water because Jesus could. So can I. And he did, didn't he? For a minute. And then he said, what have I done? The waves are rolling. I'm out here in the sea. Oops. And he started sinking. But Jesus saw him starting to sink and lifted him. Now, Jesus chided him. He said, ye of little faith. But here's the deal for us. We have little faith some days. We mess up some days. We kind of start to sink a little bit. Have you been there? I have. You start to sink. Maybe it's depression. Y'all know I deal with that. Maybe it's, for you, maybe it's the job issues. Maybe it's, I don't know, farm problems. The lady that cleans mom and dad's house, they just bought 100 pigs for their feedlot. They all have a form of pneumonia. That's devastating. And because the guy won't work with them that brought them. He said, not my problem. They weren't sick when they got off the truck. Well, they were. Maybe that. She said, my husband is just feeling so bad. He said, it may ruin us. Wow. Jesus sees you when you go to that moment, and if you're in communication with him, if, like my mother when she stumbled, if you're standing right there close to Jesus, he can catch you right then. He can lift you out. But once you get down there, it's hard to get you out. It's hard to get you out. Now, church, as a family, we need to do that for each other as well. When we see somebody going down, we need to be trying to pick them up. Don't wait until they're all the way down and then say, I hadn't seen Crystal at church in 6 months. Wonder where she went. Quicker than that. And he led him. Jesus wants to lead us by the hand. He led that man outside of the village to be alone with him, to work one-on-one with him. He'll do that for us. Again, David, he leads me beside the peaceful streams. He restores my soul. We need that sometimes as well. We need that quiet time, that peaceful time. Because I don't know who's watching, we have had other issues besides mom that are causing us some stress. And so 8 o'clock every night, we go to our rooms, our bedrooms. Everybody's in bed. We go to bed. And I have had to open the Word to calm down some nights. Just to sit down and say, it's going to be okay. whatever, it's going to be okay. Let's look at some examples of him leading us to rest. The steps of a man are established by the Lord, and he delights in his way. When he falls, he will not be thrown headlong, because the Lord is the one who holds on to his hand. He doesn't let you trip and fall flat on your face. He's got hold of you. He leads the humble in doing right, teaching them his way. The Lord leads with unfailing love and faithfulness for everyone that keeps his covenants and obeys his demands. Again, the contract has a clause there. Walk with him, and then he'll do it. For I am the Lord your God, who upholds your right hand, who says to you, do not fear, I will help you. Theme for intermediate camp this year is be strong and courageous, because when God walks with us, he can do that. He can hold our right hand up. Now, I think in military terms, the right hand is a sword hand, right? He says, I can support that hand in battle. I have never understood how warriors in those days could do it. Fight all day long in heavy armor and swords and a shield and all that. They should have had Kevlar. So much lighter. God says, when your sword arm is failing, I'll lift it up. I'll give you another day with it. I'll let you do it. Matthew 8:3, Jesus reached out and touched him and said, I'm willing, so you be healed. And instantly the leprosy was gone. I'm willing. I'm willing. When Jesus touched her hand, the fever left her. She got up and prepared a meal for him. When he touched her. Then a woman who had suffered for 12 years with a constant bleeding came up behind him and touched the fringe of his robe. And by the way, she touched the fringe. I know he didn't touch her with his hand, but he knew he'd been touched. His compassion said, who did this? And he touched her eyes and says, because you have faith, it will happen. And Jesus came over and touched him and said, don't be afraid. Jesus felt sorry for them and touched their eyes, and instantly they could see, and then they followed him. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, and all who touched him were healed. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, and everyone who touched him was healed. That touch is so important. That touch is so important. Let God touch you. Let him heal you. I can't see what's in your heart. I don't know if you just live in a world of depression and can't see the light. I don't know if you live in a world of pain and it's just wearing you down. I don't know if you have an illness that you're dealing with and it won't stop. I don't know if you're trying to raise kids in a world that is so against family these days. I don't know what it is. But whatever your illness is at this time, let God. I just lost the microphone. There it is. He is standing there beside you, reaching his hand out. One of the great Bible stories, and I mention it a lot because it is so powerful, and that is of the prodigal son. He was raised up in fairly easy living. And one day he says, I want my money, Dad. I want what you're going to give me when you die. That is so rude. But give me my share now. You're going to kick the bucket someday. So he gives him his share. I'd have said no. Go away. He gives him his share. He goes off. He parties hard. He's got lots of friends. And then one day he's broke and he's got 0 friends. They've all left him. In fact, he winds up, this young Jewish boy, feeding pigs. The worst job he could ever imagine in his world. And he's feeding these pigs and eating their leftovers. Disgusting. And he looks up and says, at least my father's slaves live better than I'm living. And he goes home. Now, here's the part of the story. From a long way off, the father saw him coming. And what we get from the fact that the father saw him from a long way off was the father stood waiting daily. For those of us who are parents, we know that feeling. You know, you tell your kids, I wasn't worried about you. Yeah, you didn't go to sleep till they got home. You know it. You know, you sat there watching. He sat there watching and waiting. Today, God stands watching and waiting. Jesus stands watching and waiting, saying, if you'll just take a step to me, I will run to you. If you come in and you say, look, I'm willing to be a slave in your household, Jesus says, I'll make you a king. I'll put a robe on you. I'll put a crown on you. I'll put a ring on your finger, that, you know, the signet ring of family. And Jesus says the same to you today. All you have to do is take that step. We offer you a chance always to come. If you do have needs and you'd like to share them, we'd love for you to come. While together we stand, while we sing.